Okay, we'll go ahead and begin, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We begin with the praise of Almighty Allah Ta'ala. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to send His peace and blessings upon His final messenger, Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, upon his family, his companions, and all those who follow his way until the day of judgment. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to make this a blessed gathering. We ask Allah Ta'ala to make this a gathering of rahmah. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to accept us, to purify our intentions. We ask Allah Ta'ala to forgive us for our sins and our misgivings, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to illuminate our hearts and to guide us upon the straight path. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. So the few moments that we have together left, inshallah ta'ala, today is to, inshallah ta'ala, go through this small risala by Imam Az-Zarnuji, giving some nasiha, some advice from wasiyah for the student of knowledge. And really, we selected this book. Ustad Abdul Sattar, who's the director of education for the academic portion of the education, selected this book because of its concise but profound and relevant nasiha and wasiyah for all of us, as inshallah those who aspire to be students of knowledge. So this book is called Ta'aleem al-Muta'allim, like the instruction of the student, Tariq al-Ta'allum, like the methodology of learning. And it's really kind of a comprehensive advice for the student of knowledge, both inwardly and outwardly, practically and theoretically. Nasiha for us as how we can proceed, inshallah ta'ala, in this path and this journey of knowledge that all of us, inshallah, are aspiring to today. And we only have a few moments together, so we'll try to highlight some of the key portions. But this book is available online. I always encourage, anytime you can get PDFs for pretty much any book electronically, but that's good for practical purposes. But I always encourage us to build a library and to purchase these books, inshallah. So this book is written by Imam Az-Zarnuji, who is a 6th century Imam. By 6th century, we mean Hijri. So usually, we like to use the Hijri years, and it's good when we study books to become familiar with the authors, and just at least have a brief biography or biographical sketch of who these Imams were and where they fit in the scheme of things historically, so that you can have a perspective contextually of where the Imam is coming from. So Imam Zarnuji is from the Transaxonia area, which is basically Central Asia. If you look historically in the Muslim world, there are a number of cities or areas, regions that became scholarly hubs. We know obviously the Hijaz, right, Mecca, Medina. We know Syria, Damascus. We know, may Allah Ta'ala free them, and facilitate their jihad, inshallah. The second is the third, and that's Sham, really, which includes Damascus, which includes Quds and these areas as well. Then you have Egypt, which was later, a later hub for scholarly development, particularly with the advent of the Azhari, Jamiat al-Azhar. And then we have most commonly in the Transaxonia area, we have Bukhara, the Central Asia. This is where we have Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim. Some of these great scholars of Hadith came from that area. And then, of course, we have Baghdad, which was the central hub of the Abbasid Khilafah. And not to forget West Africa, which became a hub as well for scholarly development, which is often neglected, as Ethiopia and such being a major center of Islamic learning and revival at various periods in Islamic history. And then, of course, we have Spain, which in the later years became part of the later Umayyad dynasty, or the residual of the Umayyad dynasty, growing in the western portion of the Muslim world, Spain and Morocco, etc., and Upper Africa. So he comes from this region, Transaxonia, which is Central Asia. I believe it's like modern day Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan. And he's from the Hanafi madhab, one of the great Hanafi scholars. And he references, this is important because in this book, he references the Hanafi ulama frequently. And he's in the 500s of the Islamic Hijri calendar. So Imam Zarnuji wrote this book. It's only about 60-something pages, giving nasiha for the student of knowledge. And he begins his discussion, which is without a surprise, discussing the merit and the fadl of ilm. Like, why is it, what is the goal of ilm? What's the fadl of ilm? Why is it something that we should aspire to seek in the first place? And he mentions first and foremost the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة. The seeking of knowledge is, as Ustad Abdul Sattar mentioned, is not something just for a scholarly class. Okay. Yes, we do have a class of ulama based on degrees of their commitment to the deen, commitment to the ilm, but there's no class of scholarship per se, as you would find in other adyan, or other religions like the Catholic religion and so on and so forth, where you have like this class that's been considered a class of scholars, but rather your scholarship is developed based on your commitment to the knowledge, your experience with it, and your recognition by your peers, right? It was really the advent of the modern day peer system of scholarship is really an Islamic one that was kind of fostered, especially during the Middle Ages, contrary to the other regions in the world. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he commands us, he says, "Talab al-ilmi farida." It's an obligation upon every Muslim, man or woman. So this is something that all of us should pursue. And everyone should be in some type of state of pursuing knowledge. It doesn't mean that all of us will become ulama in the sense that the traditional sense that we understand it, but it means that every single one of us should have a lifelong pursuit of seeking knowledge. And I thought it was brilliant, and actually I put it on Facebook, as Ustad Abdul Sattar was speaking, that one of the primary goals of this program that we have put forth in ICNA Chicago is to create a scholarly middle class. I think that was a brilliant analogy, because I believe personally, and I do believe that if we can kind of reach this critical mass of educated Muslims, those who are literate and educated in the sciences of this deen, in the Quran, in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, in the tradition of this deen, that is when we will see revival and reform of this ummah. It is because we've kind of left, and this is really kind of the state of the Muslim ummah up into the modern world, or the pre-modern world, or the post-modern world, where we find that, there was this critical mass of educated, literate Muslims throughout the Muslim world, throughout history, and this kind of broke down post-colonially, etc. And so part of the process of reformation of this ummah is reviving this scholarly middle class. And that's why I think this is quite the analogy that I thought was beautiful. And so Imam Zarnuji, he mentions that this is something that all of us have an obligation to do. And if there's any time where this obligation is that much more important in history, it is this time. Because we live in a time of complete information stimulation. We have a time where information is at our, we can literally just ask ChatGPT anything and we get a summarization of like 5,000 PhD articles on this topic. I don't know if that's exactly the case right now, but that's sure that's going to develop at some point. And so the information is at our fingertips. And so it's important for us to be grounded in our deen from an academic perspective. And it's not just for a specific class of people, but rather every single one of us needs to be able to have this grounding so that we ourselves can be anchored in our deen. And inshallah ta'ala, we can now pass that on to our children, as Ustad Abdul Sattar alluded to. And so it is actually, as for the fadl of this deen, as for the fadl, the honor and the blessing of ilm, it is this knowledge, it is ilm that makes us uniquely human. This is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, I'm going to place upon earth a khalifa. What was the response of the malaika? They said, are you going to place upon earth? And there's a number of things to be said about this ayah, but are you going to place upon earth a creation that's going to cause all sorts of fasad and bloodshed? And how they saw the capability of the human being, the destructive capability of the human being that you and I are witnessing today. We see the destructive capability of the human being. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. I know that which you do not know. Allah ta'ala knew that there's a secret of this human being. And one of the secrets of the human being, as alluded to in Surah Al-Baqarah, the subsequent ayat, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ أَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, Allah ta'ala gave ilm to Adam alayhi salam regarding the asma of everything. And there's obviously different tafsir of this ayah. But the central point of this ayah is that concept of ilm is what makes Adam alayhi salam and Banu Adam, the human being, unique. And this is what he says here. He says, with the exception of knowledge, people as well as animals to some degree they share similar virtues. There's courage, there's valor, there's strength, there's generosity, there's compassion. You can find some of these characteristics amongst various species of animals. But what makes the human being unique is ilm, is the capability of learning. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ أَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. And this is what we understand to be a unique and virtuous attribute of the human being that makes us uniquely human. The capability of, it is our aql, it is our reason, it is our capability of learning and understanding. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets. This is part of the secret of that ayah, is that Allah ta'ala knew that He would send anbiya, alayhim salam, in order to facilitate and guide human beings to that potential, to that virtuous potential. It is through the ilm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives through revelation, through His prophets alayhim salam, that brings the human being to that status, that elevates us beyond the animals. And so ilm is not something that's just information that we take, because information, anyone can bring in information. But what makes ilm, what is ilm in and of itself, is when we take that information, our aql processes that information. Allah Ta'ala gave us our aql to process that information, and then that becomes knowledge. That becomes knowledge. Information isn't knowledge. We have so much information. Information is processed by our aql and the fitrah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, and then that becomes ilm. And that ilm, what is the consequence of that ilm? Is that it becomes internalized by the human being, and that affects the character of the human being, and it now has an output, a behavioral output. So ilm encompasses all of these things. Ilm is not just who knows the most intellectually or knows the most information. Ilm is the one who has access to the most information, but they have processed that information through their aql, and they have internalized it in their character, their khulaq, and they have now an output of behavior. That's ilm in its entirety, in its comprehensive understanding. And so, as we mentioned, as we alluded to before, that the Imam, he says, what's the purpose of knowledge? He says, it is necessary for the student in his quest for knowledge to strive for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is necessary for the, why? What's the niyyah? What's the niyyah that we should have with regards to this knowledge? Like today, as we're beginning our journey together in this pursuit of knowledge, inshaAllah ta'ala, what is our niyyah? The niyyah, first and foremost, is to get the rida of Allah, to serve Allah and to worship and obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Ustad Abdul Sattar said. That fundamentally the primary purpose of this ilm is not so that we can go on Twitter and we can go on, I don't know what it was called anymore, X, we can go on Facebook, we can go on, Instagram, Snapchat, or whatever it is these days, Twitter, all these social media accounts, to go on them and just to refute and to rebut other people and to shut people down in their argument. That's not the purpose of it. Ilm, as we said, is to internalize and to change our behavior. And so he says, fundamentally, our niyyah for ilm is to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to our quest for the akhirah, the hereafter, a noble ending in the akhirah, to remove ignorance from ourselves, and to remove ignorance from those around us, to teach others, to facilitate light, to transmit the light of this deen to the world, and to revive this deen, to revive this religion, and to protect it, and to allow this religion to survive. Because he says, for the survival of Islam depends upon ilm. The survival of Islam depends upon ilm. We talk about all sorts of attacks, all sorts of challenges, all sorts of threats to our deen, to our families, to our children, whether it be LGBTQ, whether it be atheism, whether it be all these things, all these isms. And we as families, what we do, we start to seclude ourselves, we start to shelter ourselves. But the ultimate solution is to empower ourselves with ilm, empower ourselves with knowledge. Not to seclude ourselves necessarily, although that may be one part of the strategy. But if we really want to be able to protect ourselves and our families, we need to empower ourselves, anchor ourselves in ilm, in knowledge. And that is how not only do we facilitate the survival of Islam, but we also facilitate the revival of Islam, as we talked about, having that critical mass of those who have ilm. That is how, inshallah ta'ala, we can, inshallah, bring some light to this dunya, to this world. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Al-ulama'u warathatul anbiya. The people of knowledge and ulama, again, as we understand it, we had to understand it how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is speaking. He's speaking to the Sahaba. He's not speaking as we understand it. Al-ulama, like we're thinking that ulama is some type of, as we understand it today, a technical term describing a certain class of people. That's not what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. He's saying, Al-ulama warathatul anbiya. Anyone who has any inheritance, the anbiya alayhim salam, the prophets alayhim salam, they leave behind inheritance. They don't leave behind dinar. They don't leave behind wealth. The Prophet ﷺ, when he passed away, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him and salat upon him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left this, the Prophet ﷺ, he left this world and he had very few things that he left behind in terms of possession, of wealth. But the Prophet ﷺ, he left behind the most treasure of wealth, which is the treasure of nubuwah, of wahi, of revelation, of ilm. And anyone who takes from that, and that is open for anyone to take. It's not designated for only the Arabs. It's not designated for only a certain type of ethnicity, but rather it's for the entire world. Every human being can take from that wahi, take from that inheritance. What is it? It is the knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ. So anyone who has any of that inheritance is from these people, those who've inherited from prophethood. And part of the inheritance of prophethood is to facilitate revival of this deen, is to work towards the survival of Islam and the revival of Islam. And may Allah Ta'ala allow us to participate, be blessed to be of those who have the capability of participating in that noble mission. May Allah Ta'ala guide us to that. And so he goes on to say some practical advices along the way. But he says one of the practical advices is that we need to be cognizant of who we select as companions. So those of you who are not married yet, may Allah bless you with righteous spouse and healthy and good spouses. One of the most influential companions in your life is going to be your spouse. So that's number one. Think about who you want to be your spouse, because that person is going to have a tremendous impact on your life. And so one of the key things that we should be looking for in our spouses is someone who will help support us in this ilm. The second thing is your friends. Like when you go and you hang out and your friends and all they do is talk about cars and all they do is talk about watches and all they do is talk about this and all they do is talk about that. Do you think that friendship group is going to be those who are going to support you necessarily in this pursuit of yours, this noble pursuit of yours of ilm? And even like we think about friends as only something that's for like young people, like for high schoolers and college people, right? But this has an impact on me, a 40-year-old, right? The people I hang out with as a 40-year-old, it has an impact on me too. So like, when you spend your time in relaxation, be cognizant of who you spend your time with. Will they be those who support you in your pursuit? Because you have a mission. You have a mission that may be different from others. Are we going to be those who are going to be caught up in wealth and caught up in, all the dramas that are on TV and all the movies and all, etc.? Or are we going to be those who have friends around us who are going to support us and encourage us to continue in this path? So that's part of the barakah of coming to a gathering, right? Coming to a class, coming in person to the class, because you can connect with people who are like-minded, who have the same goals and objectives as you. That's part of the blessings of Jama'ah. So I encourage all of you, those of you who are in Chicago, to the best of your ability, come Thursday nights, inshallah. And you'll taste the sweetness of that, inshallah, more than being online, although I understand whatever you can do, inshallah, to gain in your ilm, that's a blessing as well, inshallah. So I know some of us, we're coming from work, we have, obligations with family, we have all sorts of reasons, but if you can come in, at least make a niyyah that you'll try your best to come in person as much as possible, inshallah ta'ala. Then he goes on to talk about how we should interact with our teachers, right? The I believe it was Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah, who one of the governors of either Bukhara or one of the nearby cities, he had to leave because Imam he had a conflict with Imam Zu'ayli, I believe it was. That's a whole history in itself. But he had to leave, and then Imam Bukhari he goes to the nearby city. He had to leave that city because of competing teachings. And so he left, and then he went to the next city, and the governor of that city he wanted Imam Bukhari to come to his palace to teach like his children, right? And teach him. And if you want the ilm, come to this place. And some people may think like, oh, this is arrogance or whatever. No, he was teaching the people the sharaf, the dignity and the honor of ilm, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That you know that we live in a time where we want everyone the people to teach come to us, entertain us, come entertain me, make me feel good. No, we got to come to the ilm. And so part of the adab, the mannerisms that we have, the etiquettes that we have with our teachers is not because of who they are in and of themselves, because they're not prophets of God. They're not anything special in and of themselves. What makes them dignified and honored is the ilm that they carry. They're vessels of this knowledge of wahi. And that's the same thing with the Anbiya alayhim salam. That what makes them special as human beings is that Allah chose them, selected them to be the vessels of revelation. And so that's why we have the etiquette with our teachers. And so he gives some practical advices of various things of etiquette with our teachers, but those are kind of understood. Those are kind of understood, but you can read the book for more details about that. But some of the things is like don't speak until they speak. One of the worst things, even if it's not with your teachers, is that even if you know something, is to tell them that you know something. You know how like if your kid comes to you and they're like telling you a story. I'd be like, oh, you already told me the story, like for the millionth time, right? How do you think that makes your child feel, right? So there's basic etiquettes that you have with anybody, is that even if they're teaching you something that you've learned a million times before, it's still something you never know. There could be some gem that you take from them nonetheless. So we should always understand that maybe there's something, I can't tell you how many times I hear people, oh, the khutbah is boring, or the khutbah is this, the khutbah, we heard this before. What is this deen other than reminder, right? So like, even if you heard it before, it's a reminder to you. Maybe you forgot. Maybe there's something that's kind of like kindle something within you. So we, number one, should never think like, oh, I've heard this before. I've learned this before, right? There's always something you can take from it. And, even if you've studied the most advanced texts, I'll tell you, even if you study the most advanced texts, you can come and still benefit from a teacher teaching a primary text, coming and teaching you some basic book, because I can't tell you how many times like I've learned a book with one person and then learning it, hearing it from other teachers, that you pick up something from that other teacher that you didn't hear from your first teacher. I mean, all of us have experienced this to some degree. So yeah, so there's no like I've studied more, so I can't go and study something below because I've already covered that before. No, I'm telling you, if you can master the primary texts, if you can master them and really understand them and understand different perspectives of that text, then you'll inshallah gain and you'll have a greater potential inshallah ta'ala. Then he goes on to say, he says, make the Quran. And he says, one way of holding knowledge in esteem is through veneration of the book of Allah Ta'ala and to be constantly in a state of ritual purity. So when we come to the classroom, we should make an intention to be in a state of tahara, like tahara with wudu, but also tahara internally, right? And then he says that we should make the Quran, we should give a particular reverence to the Quran. Those of us, so what happens oftentimes is when you start to get Abdul Sattar and anyone else could probably take witness to this, is that you start getting into like these nuances of the fiqh, because slavery is our buzzword today, right? You get into these nuances of discussion, right, of knowledge, and you're like, man, why am I even learning this stuff? Or sometimes like it becomes so technical and you're like, it starts to become really dry, because knowledge is not all just like entertainment. Knowledge is not just all entertainment. If there's anything you take from this talk today, is knowledge is not an entertainment. Sometimes you need to hear something that your soul doesn't want to hear, your nafs doesn't want to hear, and it's painful to hear it, but you have to hear it. That's what knowledge is. And it may not make you feel good, it may not make you feel happy. That's one thing. The other thing is that knowledge is not always like exciting to listen to and learn and benefit. Sometimes it's very technical, right? But one of the things that we keep ourselves grounded in this pursuit is to constantly have a connection with the Book of Allah. Have a constant connection with the Book of Allah. And I know I'm short, I fall short of this. So when I read this, or when I was preparing for this, I was like, I have a lot of work to do. May Allah Ta'ala give us all tawfiq. Then he goes on to say, not only should we have a continual anchor ourselves with the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we should have a higher commitment as those who are pursuing this noble path of knowledge. We should have a higher commitment to devotional practices. And that includes dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That includes committing to the salah. If we can get to the masjid, get to the masjid. We have a higher, one of the things I remember as a young person, Amu Faisal, may Allah preserve him, may Allah give him a noble life and continue to protect him and allow us to benefit from him. One of the first things I remember when he was our murabbi in our study circle, he said that for the da'i, for the one who's engaged in knowledge and transmission of knowledge, that person, the sunnah becomes fard upon them. And he wasn't saying it in the fiqh sense, he's saying it in the mindset sense. Like those things that are voluntary for everyone else, the pursuer of knowledge, they must have a mindset that I have a higher responsibility, that those things that are voluntary, those things that are extra, I need to commit myself to them. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he says, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا إِنِّي سَنُلْقِي عَلَيْكَ قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا. Allah Ta'ala was preparing the Prophet ﷺ that in order for you to bear this burden of this deen, this mission that I have you upon, you need to be in the night reciting Quran. And so he says we need to commit ourselves in the night, in salah, in tahajjud, in qiyam, in dhikr of Allah Ta'ala, because that is something that we should have the mindset that it is incumbent upon us, that we need to commit to that to some degree, because we are not like anybody else. Not in an arrogant sense, not in a sense that I'm better than anyone else. No, in a sense that I have committed myself to this mission. So I have a higher responsibility. One of the things in Iqtida al-Amal, Imam Khatib al-Baghdadi, who was one of the great scholars of hadith, and we owe a lot of our hadith ilm to him, he said something profound, and he said, let me find it here, inshallah. I can't find it here, but what he said is he said basically, he's like, there's nothing more painful or more harmful than the scholar who misguides people because of his actions, and the ignorant person who misguides people based on his righteous behavior. I'm summarizing, I couldn't find the exact quote, but what he was saying is that how many times have we seen, may Allah have mercy upon those du'at and teachers, how many times have we seen when there's misconduct of people who have powerful influence because of the knowledge that Allah elevated them with? Because of their misconduct, how many people have gone astray because of that? How many times do we see when there's teachers and du'at and popular personalities in the Muslim world who we find out that they have committed misconduct, and because of that misconduct, it turns so many people away from the deen. So the one who is seeking knowledge and teaching, I mean, imagine, just think about your own family, right? I can't tell you how many times we're like, especially in my young days when I was like very vocal and kind of arrogant. May Allah forgive me. And then you're kind of giving da'wah to your family, and then they know every single one of your like sins and your character flaws. And so how many times they're like, well, but you like who are you to tell me, right? Because of your behavior, you're ineffective in your ability to guide others. And so the one who is committed to knowledge, they have a higher responsibility to make sure they keep themselves on track. And that's why the shaitan, he goes to them the most. He goes to them the most. You're going to hear whispers. You're going to be tempted. You're going to be, he is going to come after you more than anybody else. So you need to do your adhkar, you need to do your salah, you need to commit yourself to the devotional acts of Islam so that you can protect yourself from the whispers of shaitan. You can protect yourself from the evils of your own character that's been developed because of your life experiences. And ask Allah Ta'ala for assistance, because that's ultimately the only way we can protect ourselves, hold ourselves to a higher demand. We think 5 hours a week is a lot, but it's actually isn't a lot, right? But at the same time, know your limitations. Don't take on too much. Be gradual. We chose these amount of hours because we see ourselves as professionals, as parents, as children. We know, like, okay, we can sacrifice an hour of TV every day for 5 days, right? So that's kind of the equivalence of 5 hours a week. So like, if you can make sacrifices, 5 hours is not a lot, but be consistent, small but consistent with our knowledge. He advises us. And then he goes on to discuss some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ about he says the Prophet ﷺ said 3 kinds of people are beyond doubt hateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who's a glutton, a miser, and an arrogant person. And there's similarities between all of these people, but they're very selfish people. But ultimately, he talks about the importance of, being moderate in the way that we eat and the way that we drink. Now, this is kind of, some people may feel like, okay, this is kind of like fat shaming or something like that. That's not what he's saying here. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, there's no vessel that's more evil for the human being to fill than the vessel of the stomach. And there is a spiritual reality to this that our ulama have emphasized here. But the point is this, is that as the one who is a talib al-ilm, the one who is committed to knowledge, it's important for us to prioritize our mental and physical health. Our mental and physical health is important. We should commit to, I don't know, maybe I can't do 5 miles a day like Saad Bhai, right, of running every day, but we should commit ourselves to a healthy lifestyle, because that gives us energy, that gives us capability of fulfilling our mission, inshallah ta'ala. Now, as to what can we do to prepare ourselves for class? So, my personal advice, everyone has a different style of learning, right? My personal advice is read the assigned reading before you come to class. Read the assigned reading before you come to class actively, and make notes, and make your personal notes and organize it in your head before you even come to class. Then when you come to class, focus on understanding. Focus on understanding. Sit and listen to the imam. What happens is sometimes we focus on the writing and the recording, and then we miss like 5 important points that the teacher brought. And so that's something that's very, something that we need to keep in mind, is focus on reading before you come to class. Come to class and sit and listen. Then when you have a break, then you sit and you try to rewrite what you remember. That's why you have other students. You have other students is because you can come together after class to share notes, to share reflections, to etc. We have the recording, audio recording, the video recording, so that if you feel like you missed something, because sometimes I was like, man, that was an amazing point that my teacher said, and I was like, I need to go back and listen to that. To thank God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with video recordings and everything. Go back and listen to it and write it down. And that's the third portion, is going back and recording, writing down what you remember, the key points, because comprehension is the most important part of ilm. And that's where recall and everything will come. So focus on that. We have a couple minutes before Salah. 1 more minute. Sorry. Okay, inshallah. Was it Adhan called?
Yeah.
Okay. There's other things to say, but I wanted to finish this point. One of the beautiful things about this program that we're bringing to you is that we have teachers from every background. He says it's necessary to pursue knowledge by means of discussion, debate, and inquiry. Number one is that any teacher who tells you that my word is the word and no one else you should not challenge my word, that's somebody you should abandon. That's my personal advice to you. All of my teachers, and they're the most knowledgeable people, they've always encouraged inquiry and discussion and questioning and comprehension. So number one is we should come to the class with commitment to the deen, commitment to understanding and learning, but also be willing to challenge your teacher and let them respond to you, inshallah ta'ala, with adab, right? Number two is have teachers from various backgrounds. Have teachers from various backgrounds that will give you a comprehensive understanding. We have Maliki imams teaching you. We have Hanafi imams teaching you. We have all sorts of imams teaching you, because all of them will come and give you some anecdote. And lastly, we do not take this knowledge in order to rebut and criticize and attack other people. That comes from our ego. That comes from our arrogance. We recognize that our commitment to this deen is one of rahmah and one of plurality. And there's different ways of looking at things of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so, this is one of the beautiful things of having teachers from different backgrounds. Have a Salafi teacher, have a Hanafi teacher, have a teacher from the Mutakallimun, teacher from the background of Athari background. Do that so that you can grow in your understanding. Recognize that there are some things that your teacher says that may sit with you, and sometimes they may not sit well with you. But seek to understand. Have adab and mannerisms, but recognize that if you take from people from different backgrounds, you'll only expand in your understanding of this deen. That's my personal advice. I'm not saying that as an institutional advice. That's my personal advice. And this is one of the what we try to put together for all of us is ulama from different backgrounds, so that inshallah ta'ala we can expand in our understanding of this deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in our knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in our understanding. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us, bless us in this path of ilm and tarbiyah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be better mothers, better fathers, better children, better husbands, better wives, and better community members. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to pursue this with sincerity. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa barik wa sallam.
So Dhuhr is going to start in about 3 minutes. There are bathrooms right over here. If anybody needs to make wudu, there's wudu downstairs, available downstairs as well for men. The women's musalla is right there. I appreciate Sheikh Abdul Sattar, Dr. Arif, for teaching us today, sharing these kind words, alhamdulillah, beneficial, inshallah. If anybody has questions on the program, please stay afterwards. After Dhuhr, you can ask any of us questions, inshallah, and we can go from there. Thank you all for participating. Thanks for coming in person today, alhamdulillah. Please take some more food. There's a lot left. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.